This is the Celiac Project, two guys talking gluten-free. Just wanted to give a little disclaimer. We are not medical experts, doctors, dietitians,
Nurses.
bone experts, surgeons.
We're only experts at being celiac patients.
So enjoy the show. And if you're going to do any changes to your diet or need real medical advice, please go to the medical professionals.
That's what they're there for.
Today's episode of the Celiac Project podcast is sponsored by Taste Republic, who believes everyone deserves to eat good, fresh pasta, no matter their dietary restrictions. All of Taste Republic's pastas are certified gluten-free and beloved for not sacrificing taste or texture. With fan favorites such as 4-cheese tortelloni and cauliflower linguine, Taste Republic has a wide range of pastas to choose from. Find Taste Republic at retailers such as Whole Foods Market, Publix, Sprouts, Meijer, H-E-B, or online at tasterepublic.com. The Celiac Project podcast is proud to be partnered with Bull & Company MediaWorks, specialists in website design and digital marketing with over 20 years of experience. Go to bullcm.com to find out about all of their services. You found the Celiac Project podcast, two guys talking gluten-free. I'm Mike.
And I'm Cam.
And what are we talking about on today's podcast, Cam?
Today you have found our 2026 Celiac State of the Union.
Yes, happy Celiac Awareness Month, everyone. We're going to dive into our annual Celiac State of the Union podcast. We talk about some of the things that are wins and losses for the celiac community and where we're going from here. Let's get to the show.
Sounds good.
Hey, Cam, happy May.
Happy May.
And more importantly, happy Celiac Awareness Month, or as I call it, the acronym CAM for short.
I always forget that.
Yeah, I guess in some ways you were destined to have celiac disease.
That's hilarious.
I hope that's not the case, but a funny little note that Celiac Awareness Month also is CAM for short. But anyways, not to digress, but I'm always excited when we record our annual Celiac State of the Union, which we do every single year. And I think as I'm starting, I realize this is an interesting year as you've now been back at school. Like there's some interesting things coloring both our years that maybe didn't in the past. You being back at school and then the fact that I've been looking at schools with Jessica, and here's a exciting teaser. In 2 weeks, that show will come out with Jessica and her huge unveiling of which school she chose. So you don't want to miss that one. Very special. We always like to do special programming for Celiac Awareness Month. So I hope everyone's looking forward to that. It should be a great show. But you've been back in school for now over a year, right?
Yeah, there was a small gap in there when there was a transfer issue, but otherwise, yeah, I've been back for like a year and a half or so, plus or minus a little bit. But yeah, exactly right. And
Right.
then with the accumulation of my past credits, I'm about a year out from being done here.
Right. And it'll be interesting because now you are living in a dorm situation and had to deal with the dining hall. So I'm sure that will come up. And I've had this college search going on where I've visited a lot of campuses. So maybe we're going to sprinkle some of that in. And also wanted just to give a little bit housekeeping. If you haven't heard our Celiac State of the Union, we do it differently sometimes. But basically what it is Cam and I have our reflections on the year, the things that we feel have been on the upswing, improving for those of us in the celiac community, and those that maybe need more work, and then maybe some of the negatives as well. And before we started today, you and I got the opportunity, a big shout out to University of Chicago, who's in our backyard. It was a really great thing leading up to Celiac Awareness Month that they had their Celiac Disease Across the Lifespan event. We were able to join. It was just like a powerhouse of great celiac doctors. And at the same time, they had their wonderful In Transit group, which is their teen group. And my daughter, Jessica, has been part of some of the things over the years there. And it's a really, really impressive group of young people. And we were able to go to that, and we were able to jump around to both events, which was really cool. So, big shout outs to Dr. Verma and her staff and Rachel, who were lovely enough to have us involved in the event. And I was really inspired, and I wasn't going to do mine in any sort of particular order, but I thought because I was so inspired by the event at UFC, wanted to start off, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
If I go first, I was going to say my first one is this youth movement that I've seen. And again, some of this, Cam, is probably colored by the fact that I've been visiting campuses and gotten to meet some young people who are working with dietitians and other people. And then I also, I've mentioned I'm a member of the Celiac Kids Connection board out of Boston Children's Hospital. And I am so inspired by all the young people that are on our board. They bring so much energy. They always have really incredible ideas and thinking outside the box on events and other issues around celiac. And so I'm so inspired by them as well. And while we're talking about some of the great youth movement that's happening, I also wanted to shout out the great work at Seattle Children's, Dr. Dale Lee and Dr. Anne-Marie Ramka, who was recently on a podcast with our friend Ann Moon, who currently is working at Seattle Children's with them as well. So shout out to all of them and all the work they're doing and getting kids involved there as well. But I wanted to start off today with my list talking specifically about some of the stuff that we saw at the University of Chicago. There were panels and presentations by the group that they're calling In Transit at University of Chicago. And I feel like I don't want to compare generations or anything. We're all doing our best. It's like the people my age who were diagnosed, I think it was sort of a shock to our system. And I understand I'm very much an advocate in the celiac world, as you are. So I'm not saying this new group is better or worse at advocating. I just felt a new energy in the celiac youth, like those in their teens. And I was really impressed by all of them. There was even a young woman who is graduating from a local high school, and she took it upon herself to meet with administrators at her school and have a gluten-free hot lunch instituted at her high school. And she's actually graduating and going to college, but she's going to hand that off to another student at the school. And I was just really inspired by stories like that. They were sharing how they're athletes and how to deal with some of the things that I see my daughter, who's a high school athlete, deal with. And I felt like what I came away with from that was, I think we're in good hands as the next generation starts moving into the world and helps with decisions and things like that. And did you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I agree. It was very cool to get to hop around at the University Chicago symposium event that we were at there. And like you said, going up to the upstairs where they were doing the in-transit program, it was cool to see the amount of people for one. So I was thinking, okay, wow, so diagnosis rates are up. And then kind of to what you were saying about handling the diagnosis too. I think when you're diagnosed super young, like Jess was, and like a lot of those kids in the in-transit program are, you don't know any different. So it's not so shocking, like you were saying, for you when you were older. It's because there's such a reality shift going on. But for them, they don't have to really experience that reality shift, or it's happening so early on in their life now with the resources available. It can be not so traumatic of an experience. And you have the right supports and things like that. And then, of course, the peer-to-peer support now, too, because of the amount of people and the amount of education. So totally, I agree. And I feel very comfortable with the celiac kids and adults of the future. It's going to be all right.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, and it's really an interesting thing when you're diagnosed young with this. I actually asked a question there of the panel because Jessica wasn't able to join us because she had a softball game that day. I asked them a question about what their biggest challenge with celiac disease was, and I think almost all of them said the social part, but I wanted to get up and say, I wish it got easier. I think it does in some ways get easier, maybe that you don't care as much if you're eating something different or if you have to wait to eat, but it's still, that is a pressure on all of us that I will get to that later. But why don't you share the first thing on your list?
Sure. So when I was making my list, I was thinking about what you said, positives, negatives, interesting, intriguing, all of that sort of stuff. And then I also was linking to some of the stuff that was inspiring from going to University of Chicago's event. I kind of have an order for mine, but it will change depending on if some of your topics also match mine, but that's okay. So the first one I had on my list was something we covered in the podcast earlier in the year, and it was the Illinois Allergen Awareness Act. And that's where they're going to have mandatory add gluten to the allergen list of training. So it doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be all that much more training, but the term, the word, the idea, and understanding is going to definitely become more prevalent. And even though it's only Illinois, I'm sure some other states will do this or adopt this. And it would be really great if this could be something that would get adopted nationally, potentially. And I'm just going to stay on that topic, but I will say that that kind of leads into one of my other topics later on.
Okay. And I love that. And I didn't have that exact one on my list. But yes, we had Senator Sally Turner on, and we did a whole podcast about that. And it was a great podcast because she actually shared it was that I believe it was her chief of staff who had celiac disease. And it was so inspiring that she was motivated to do this because they would just go out and try to like eat as a staff and would always have to work around things. So it's nice when someone is exposed to that who has some ability to make things better, in this case, Illinois, and we're hoping that other states follow. But I'm glad that you had that one on your list. Do you want to go to your next one that relates to that?
Sure, that'd be awesome. Yeah. So this one is way more recent. And as of the day of our recording, it's the last day. So unfortunately, if you had forgotten to do this, you cannot do this any longer. But the FDA has asked the public for information regarding labeling and how it affects you as a celiac. And part of it was specifically oats, but just labeling in general. And this is the first time that the FDA has ever done anything like that, where they've reached directly to the public, because the benefit of this is we've talked about all sorts of different legislation for celiac and gluten-free things. And I know this is only on the topic of labeling, but normally they would have to go through such a larger, longer process through Congress. And I don't know if it would be one of those situations where it's got to get attached to some other, bill or act. And we don't want that. So it's really nice that they're reaching directly out to us and that we're being able to share our opinion. And they did extend it 30 days or so from the initial deadline. So that was also nice. And so the reason that that connects back to my first point is one of my suggestions that I put out to the FDA was to adopt this idea. I know it's not necessarily connected to the labeling, but this could be more national, like where even though it's not labeling on a specific product, it's considered labeling for restaurants, for instance, like on a menu at a restaurant.
Yeah, that would be good. And I agree with you again. Really good one to have on your list there. The fact that they're reaching out directly to us. And I did put some notes in there, and hopefully this will lead to an avalanche of more change. We've talked every year about the issues with labeling and obviously the pharmaceuticals as well. And so it's nice, like you say, that they're reaching out, the FDA, directly to the people who are going through this. And I hope we can institute change. It does feel like there is change coming. And it's interesting because I think that leads into my next one, which is there was such an interesting talk about the research on medications, where we're at. I mean, it was so inspiring to have a group there. I don't want to mention everybody because I'm sure I'm going to leave people out, because there was Dr. Jocelyn Sylvester, Dr. Marissa Stahl, Benjamin Lebwall, of course, Dr. Edwin Liu, Joseph Murray, who's like on the Mount Rushmore for celiac disease researchers. Of course, Dr. Verma, Dr. Semrad, as I said, the great doctors at U of C, including Sonia Kupfer, Dr. Kate O'Sullivan, and she is an endocrinologist. Dr. Joseph Chapman. Dr. Chapman, I believe, is one of the newer University of Chicago celiac doctors. I'm trying to mention all that I can, but Dr. Elena Verdu, who actually I hadn't seen since I interviewed her for the Celiac Project documentary. She came from McMaster's University all the way in Canada. Just so many great doctors. I've tried to mention all that I can, and I'm sorry because I know I've missed a bunch, but that gives you some picture of just how great the caliber of doctors there were at this event. Many, many great doctors who are also involved with research, and it was really inspiring not just to hear them talk, but to hear them debate some of the subjects. There was even a little bit of like joking about the moving target, about when we're going to have some sort of pharmaceutical intervention, be it if it's something that allows us to get cross contact or something that eventually turns off the gene for celiac. That seems like it's a long, long way away. But Dr. Lebwohl, he did a lovely keynote talk about sort of the state of where we are. And he talked about there's like a paradox between the progress and patience, where some of the good things that are happening is that they finally, like you're speaking of the FDA, they finally said, well, we can't just have each study have different amounts of gluten if there's a gluten challenge involved. So they're trying to set up something that's more like controlled. And I think Dr. Lebwohl was saying that's mostly good. And sometimes you need to have some control over that. But I think it's nice that they're trying to create a framework so that we keep getting these medications to phase 2, but a lot of them sort of stall out. And I guess this is my next one on the list that I'm talking about. The issues with the pharmaceuticals is there's a lot of good and a lot of bad, where if you look, there are a ton of different medications that are now in different phases that are actually getting farther along. And the doctors there talked about some of the financial pressures where a study can run out of money. Sometimes it's unknown why a drug study stops. It might be because it was found to not be effective in the trials, and it could just be that they ran out of money. And sometimes we don't find out about that. But it's nice that so many doctors are involved in this, and so many of them are working together, having these discussions. One thing that Dr. Semrad from University of Chicago did, which was, she just was my hero. She said, these patients of ours with celiac disease are dealing with so much with the stress and the pressure of living the gluten-free life. It is hard to ask people to take part in a study who have celiac and then ask them to ingest gluten in that study, sometimes at unknown times.
We've talked about that a long time ago too.
Yeah.
Like how that could interrupt your life.
And I think you had to leave before that. And she was saying that exact thing. These people have jobs and children and social lives. And so I felt like there was a really good balance there of these doctors. Sometimes we hear stories about people getting diagnosed and getting sent on their way. There is a group of doctors out there studying celiac and also working with patients, and has such great empathy and understanding of the level of stress that it takes to live with this strict gluten-free diet, and that's our only treatment. And her point was like, how can we figure out the easiest way to do these studies and to put people under the least amount of burden, right? And they also did point out that they have really studied closely that you can ingest a certain amount of gluten. This is very controlled when they're doing the studies, and not have the villus atrophy, not have real damage. You'll have inflammation and get symptoms.
Right.
But they are trying to control that there's no long-term damage from being in one of these studies. So I want to reiterate, this is what they're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's still, though, the inflammation response is still, to me, concerning. I understand they need to frame this up to be a selling point to people. I would say if your symptoms are, non-existent, asymptomatic to mild, then that's probably a good idea. But if you have super severe reaction, then I still would advise against it, probably myself.
Oh, 100%, Cam. And I think that's a really good point. I mean, we're all on a certain spectrum as far as how we react. And most of us, if we're living really controlled diet, like I've gotten to a point where, knock wood, I don't feel like I get gluten that often. And it's unknown. Maybe I do, and my villi are healed, and so I'm able to tolerate cross contact better. I don't know. They seem to believe this based on studies that they've done about looking at the villi after these things and studying it over a long term. But it's a good point that we all have a different threshold and it's unknown. And all of this is like a personal choice. But, it's interesting. They talked about the lorazepam study that you and I were in.
Yeah.
And we both were in that study. There was no gluten challenge, and that did make it a lot easier. And my hats are so off to people are going into studies.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, and are doing this because you are really, as I've said before, pioneers and really moving us forward. And I'm not saying I won't ever do that again, but with two relatively young kids and, trying to do my best to live my life, make a living and all of that, I couldn't do it right now. I'm not saying again that I would never do that, maybe in my retirement days if they want me then, but it's really interesting.
Well, and you've done it before, so it's not like you haven't done it.
Right.
Everyone did it at least once and did one study. That would be a pretty big push too.
Hey Cam, before we continue the podcast, I'd like to take a minute to talk about our sponsor, Taste Republic, who makes delicious, fresh, gluten-free pasta. A lot of times we'll get our family together and it's so wonderful to have Taste Republic. There is literally something for everyone. We have people who are gluten-free and dairy-free in the family. We have gluten-free vegetarians, and we actually have some family members who are a little more finicky and don't really want to eat their vegetables. And Taste Republic solves all those issues in the most delicious way. Isn't that right, Cam?
That's totally right. All of Taste Republic's pasta is gluten-free, offering distinct options tailored to organic, grain-free, paleo, and high-protein preferences. Some of their pastas even include vegetable servings per portion. Their range includes organic varieties, traditional shapes, and filled pastas featuring real Wisconsin cheese. The fan favorite cauliflower linguine shines as both grain-free and paleo-friendly. They're all delicious, and subscriptions are available online at 10% off when you subscribe for 1 to 4 months with reoccurring deliveries. Visit tasterepublic.com and use code Celiac Project to save 20% off your online order to have delicious, fresh, gluten-free pasta shipped directly to your doorstep.
Now let's get back to the show.
Sounds good.
And, this maybe leads nicely to my next one. So a big friend of the podcast, Elise Bedell, Dr. Elise Bedell, who's a GI psychologist who we've had on the podcast before, also was there with Lori Wellstad, the fantastic dietitian at UFC. Don't want to forget her as well.
It was so nice to meet them in person finally.
Yeah. I had met Lori a number of times, but it was nice to meet Elise, and they were wonderful, got to talk to them. But both of them did great presentations, and I really enjoyed. Lori did a great job breaking down how much gluten would give a reaction and talked about some of the hypervigilance that we have to go through. And Dr. Bedell, she talked about something she was calling the hypervigilance tax, or the psychological toll of living with celiac disease. I thought that was a really interesting way to frame it. And I had a couple of notes from her talk where I think she said cognitive labor, it's not just a diet, it's a high stakes safety protocol requiring hundreds of micro decisions daily, leading to massive decision fatigue. I think we go through that. I'm framing this around something that I think still needs work, where I feel like we still live in this crazy hypervigilance day to day. And she talked about the mental health connection, that patients are 6 times more likely to experience anxiety. The risk is 70% higher in the first year post-diagnosis. So she made a really interesting point. If there are listeners out there who have just been diagnosed in the last year or so, that the symptoms of depression and anxiety are 70% higher in the first year of diagnosis. And that makes sense because
Totally.
yeah, you're still just wrapping your mind around this. It's a big change to be, thrown at you. We've all gone through that, but that might be a good time to seek out some help, be it talk therapy or any sort of support that you can find to work through that, and to sort of give yourself grace, because that learning curve at the beginning, and again, just the huge change of, we all had to learn the little steps. And I guess I wanted to bring this up, as I said, is because our level of hypervigilance is the same as when we started this. And I guess that connects to wanting to find, Dr. Lebwald did a big questionnaire to the celiac community, and a huge number of us don't necessarily have the need to eat gluten right now. We just would like to be less hypervigilant and less worrying about cross contact. And I know anecdotally, when we talk to our group and others, that seems like hopefully a reasonable thing that we can get to, but I'm super bummed that we still have that same level.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. And I wanted to connect what you're saying too with the mental health side of celiac disease. I remember taking a picture of one of Elise's slides, and besides just depression and anxiety, obviously eating disorders is up there too because of how much focus on food and diet there is. There's an increased risk for that. The one that I was not expecting to see, but maybe we did talk about this at some point in the past, was the autism spectrum disorder. So that was super interesting to me. And then the last one was ADHD and all of its subtypes. So, and then, like you said, too, that's a good time to go seek out any kind of mental health treatment. And ideally, you could find a GI psychologist, but there's not many of them in each state, even. And so then the next one would be a health psychologist that they might be more specialized in helping people after a major diagnosis. But that doesn't mean that regular psychologist or therapist, it doesn't have that specialty. So you can always ask if they've worked with anyone that has dealt with any major diagnosis of any type. Obviously, if they had with celiac, that's even more of a bonus. But yeah, then there's all different levels of help you can get, because if you end up needing medication, then that's psychiatry. So there's lots of ways to get help.
All very good tips. Yeah, really good. Did you want to share another one?
Sure. So this one was through my own researching. I'm not sure how I missed this one. It's kind of a news and notes one, but it connects to when we were going to hear all the doctors talk at University of Chicago. I was just thinking about all of like, what is cutting edge? Where is the research at? And we've talked about this as a wish, a hope, and a dream. And they're getting closer and closer to being able to do a blood test without a gluten challenge to be able to diagnose celiac disease. And so that's very promising and good to hear. I'm not really sure how far along it is, but the fact that they have found markers that are significant enough to continue down this road is what's hopeful.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I don't know if you remember, we had Dr. Francisco Leon on the podcast a while back. He
Hmm.
said in certain countries the test
Yes.
exists already, and I believe they have it. So what happens is they found that, just off the top of my head, but basically, even if you're on the gluten-free diet, that there are certain traits of your blood and that they can mix it in a lab and do this test and find out if you have active celiac despite being on the gluten-free diet. And they did talk about that at the University of Chicago event that we were just at. So I'm confident that that's coming, and that'll be a huge step forward for your family who all went gluten-free in solidarity, as we've said, and just would be an amazing thing because, I mean, we used to go to those expos all the time and we'd have a booth, and I always have this memory of people, they would say to me, can I just be a member of the celiac club even though I don't have the full
Hmm.
diagnosis? And I always say, more or less, you have celiac to me. If you're convinced that you had to go gluten-free and you can't get back on gluten, you most likely do have celiac disease. However, there are really important reasons to know that, to really get diagnosed. It changes for insurance for things like, I mean, you and my daughter Jessica are at school, and it really changes how you can get the accommodations. So it really changes, like, we have to get in writing for the accommodations that she has diagnosed celiac disease. And if it's just a gluten intolerance or a non-diagnosed celiac disease, you really just don't have some of the same abilities. And just for your own well-being, because the systems, as we know with celiac disease, because it's an autoimmune condition and you're getting a different reaction and it can lead to certain cancers, it's just really, I think, important. That would be a great thing. I'm so glad you added that to the list. This is fun because we usually overlap like at least 50%. And I feel like we're both on the same tangent on things, but we're kind of like feeding each other sort of perfectly.
Totally.
Yeah,
Totally
we're
agree.
setting each other up perfectly. But I'll just go to, this is mostly my last one, and it has to do with the medication labeling. I feel like now, maybe for the past couple years, this has been like I'm sort of on my soapbox about this, but I'm going to take it in a little different way. And you and I have talked about this recently and with our group as well, is that not just is it hard to figure out which drugs, both over the counter and prescription, are gluten-free, and we have to make calls to other countries and confused pharmacists and all of that, but going to some of the big box stores, the Targets and the Costcos of the world, I see that the over-the-counter medications that were clearly labeled, some of them or a lot of them are losing that label. And that's really, I'd say, a downward thing, especially because I feel like the awareness is going up. And I understand it's about the bottom line. A lot of times supply chains change, but I think it's just really frustrating. So our go-to was always the Kirkland brand ibuprofen, always a Costco. It had a big old gluten-free on the front, and now it's gone. And I am frustrated with that, and I hope they start bringing that back. I find the same things happening with stuff at Target, at Walmart, at Sam's Club. It goes on and on. So I'm sure you have some thoughts on that one as well.
Yeah, no, I've definitely noticed the same thing, and it's definitely disheartening. And I guess I put my conspiracy hat on, and I'm like, is it because they're, like you said, changing some kind of filler regularly because of availability? Is it because of some kind of manufacturing thing that they can no longer not guarantee that there's not cross contamination on the lines for some reason? Or, and this would be kind of cool, but also not cool, like, or do we have better standards coming soon and they don't want to, they're trying to just kind of be ahead of it because they know they won't fit the new standard? And I'm not going to jump fully into that topic, but that's kind of then my next topic.
Okay,
Will
I'll
be
let
that.
you go. I'll just have one more thought on that. My understanding is, from what I've learned, read, and talked to people about who are in the industry, is that so a place, let's just, I'm not trying to throw Costco under the bus or anything. Obviously, Kirkland, they are putting out a lot of these over-the-counter medications. They're made in huge bulk, and they don't always have the same warehouse and suppliers. The good thing, if there's a silver lining to this, Cam, is that
Mhm.
so if it's made in warehouse A or B, they put a lot number on everything. So most of these places, almost without exception, wherever it's from, Walmart, Target, Costco, Walgreens, CVS, whatever, they have a number there and they have a lot number. And if you call them and sometimes you leave a message, they almost without exception, they'll get back to you. As I'm saying, this is a silver lining, is most of the time it comes back gluten-free, even the stuff that used to be marked. I bought an acid reducer that I purposely made a trip to Sam's Club because it said online that it's marked gluten-free. I got it home and it was not marked gluten-free. I called them up and they told me this one's gluten-free, but you have to call each time. So it was
Mm,
frustrating.
fun.
Yeah, a lot of fun. Anyways, go to your next one. And I'm hoping when we do this next year in 2 years that we have a lot of progress on that.
Yeah, definitely. So this connects back to my first one and to what you had just said, and also to the event at University of Chicago, because it's about the slide that Lori put up when she was talking about the Italian study that determined the amount of gluten that may be tolerated by someone with celiac disease. And they tested 0, 10, and 50 milligrams of gluten over 90 days. And the conclusion was that 50 milligrams of gluten induced villus damage. So that was like what you were saying before about like how they know the number. So anyway, connecting back to my first one with the FDA and being able to write in about the labeling, even though I know the standard may not be directly connected to the labeling, that is where the labeling standard lies. And so I think with these new studies coming out, hopefully we will have a new standard and it'll be below 20 parts per million or whatever it needs to be, so that over the course of a day with the, a regular amount of eating, we're not accumulating more than that much in a day. Because that's also, I still think, a concern. So that's kind of my last one, was just that now that we know that like inflammation happens in the lower parts per million, I don't really remember milligrams, even what it was measuring, but I know it was lower than whatever our standard is. Obviously, that's not good. We want none if we can. But if everything that's being packaged and labeled gluten-free at least meets the new science and new standards, because it'd be so dumb to like have a new labeling situation and it's based on old science and then we got to do it all over again.
Right. And that's a really good one, Cam, and a nice one to end on. And you brought up this past month in April when we were meeting with our wonderful TCP Inner Circle. I think you brought up that 92% of the food sent to Trisha Thompson at Gluten Free Watchdog in 2025 came up under 5 parts per million,
Yeah, yeah.
which I think is a really nice thing to end on today, is that when Gluten Free Watchdog tests a product, that such a high percentage comes up so low for gluten, not just under 20 parts per million, but under 5 parts per million, which shows you that the companies that are really working for us and really trying to do safe gluten-free food are not just doing it, they're way under what the standard that has been set in the United States. So I know all those companies are trying to get as close to zero as possible. And I know that zero is, we're told, very impossible, but it's great that there are so many great companies out there, you know, like our wonderful sponsor, Taste Republic, who do all the testing and make sure everything is good. But I feel that the state of the union is overall good. I do feel with the energy between the medical community and the youth, and as you say, the FDA trying to get us involved to get labeling laws changed, I feel like we're on an upswing. Did you have any final thoughts today?
No, I agree. I feel like this one's different in a way. There seems to be more tangible progress where maybe other ones were, spiritual progress or emotional progress or something, along those lines, educational progress. But this one seems like there's more tangible, like everything around has kind of caught a wave. That's kind of how I feel. Do you agree with that?
I do. That's my big point. My big takeaway is that I feel this energy. It was, like I say, it was really great to feel like the doctors are really focusing on the right things, and that there's a lot of, we keep saying there's more coming down the pipeline, but I do feel good. I mean, I think if I had a little bonus thing, this is sort of a tease for our next podcast, but the school that Jessica ended up choosing, I just couldn't feel better about some of the things that they have in place to help keep her safe as someone with celiac. And I know it hasn't been exactly the same for you in school, and I hope that only improves. But yeah, I feel really, really optimistic. This has been fun. I hope everybody has a wonderful, safe, happy Celiac Awareness Month, and we will see you next time.
Sounds good. See ya.
We have a special offer for you now through Celiac Awareness Month.
Yeah, now through May, our wonderful sponsor, Taste Republic, is partnering with us to offer anyone who joins our TCP Inner Circle with some awesome gifts.
If you sign up for $5 a month for a year, we'll send you a $10 Taste Republic coupon so you can try some of their amazing fresh pasta on them. And we'll send you one of their eco-conscious organic tote bags, perfect for those grocery store runs.
If you join our TCP Inner Circle for $10 a month for a year, Taste Republic will also give you a really nice apron so you can show off your chef skills and style. And we'll send you a Celiac Project t-shirt, our way of saying thanks for letting us support you on your gluten-free journey.
With some free Taste Republic pasta and some great swag, you can look fresh and cook fresh.
The best part is that as a TCP Inner Circle member at any level, you get to be a part of our hangouts with us and other members once a month. We love our incredible listeners, and we're always learning something from one another.
This offer is only valid in the U.S. Go to patreon.com/Celiac Project to join or to find out more about how we are making a difference in the celiac community.
Come join us at our next TCP Inner Circle hangout.